So thank you all for coming out this evening to attend our town hall that we've titled Together We Can Win Retirement Security for Everyone. My name is Sean McKenny. For those not aware, I'm president of the Ottawa District Labour Council. The Labour Council in Ottawa is one of the oldest and the largest of the approximate 111 Labour Councils across the country, dating back to 1872 and representing approximately 90 union locals with a combined membership of over 50,000 working men and women. A few years ago, the Canadian Labour Congress launched the Retirement Security for Everyone campaign, and the result, quite frankly, was nothing short of astonishing. People started to pay attention to CPP, to GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, to OIS, Old Age Security. It was a hot button issue, not just in our city, but in communities across the country. Newspaper articles, letters to the editor, talk radio, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, blogs. The topic was everywhere, including with our elected officials. We've got a federal election coming up in 2015. We're not sure when it's going to happen. It's going to be in the spring or if it's going to be in October. And for this Labour Council and for those across the country, for Labour in general and others, this area, this issue, retirement security, is a pillar, one of 5 that Labour will be focused on. Here in Ottawa, it's expected that the number of seniors will double over the next 15 years. Double. And 15 years is not a long time. Year 2000 seems like yesterday to a lot of us sitting here, right? Seniors who have worked hard all their lives, and at a time when they should be enjoying their golden years, many are struggling to get by. Not only are we here tonight to educate, but we're also here to mobilize on this important issue. We need to cause Conservative candidates and MPs to be nervous that their party is not addressing this issue, to ensure that they understand that the Harper government is on the wrong side of the debate, and those Conservative candidates need to know that they are too. So tonight is not just about educating, it's also about mobilizing and shining a light on financial insecurity in Ottawa. It's about what you can do as individuals and as organizations, and it's about what we can do together on this important issue. Similar town halls such as this have already taken place or will be taking place in the coming weeks across communities, in communities across Canada. Our agenda this evening is pretty straightforward. We do have a speaker coming up, and then on to our panelists, and then on to a presentation. We'll have some time towards the end of the meeting to have a chat, to talk about what you can do and what we can do together around retirement security. We're scheduled to finish by 8 o'clock. As I stated earlier, the Canadian Labour Congress has been at the forefront of retirement security, at the forefront of promoting positive change, including expanding the Canada Pension Plan. As a part of that process, Hassan Yussuff has continually pushed forward the campaign to win a secure and adequate retirement for everyone in Canada. As president of the 3.3 million strong C.L.C, Brother Yussuff has stated repeatedly that a crisis has been slowly brewing in this country, and that there is more and more evidence we have a serious problem of inadequate retirement savings in this country. It is indeed a pleasure to introduce the President of the Canadian Labour Congress, Brother Hassan Yussuff.
First, let me start. Thanks, Sean. I want to thank all the activists and leaders that's in the room for being here tonight. This is an important event not only for Ottawa, but it's also important in regard to what I said and commit to the C.L.C convention, that we were going to relaunch this campaign. Activists have told me, and I'm sure many of you have told me this directly, that the campaign was a great campaign for the period you were involved in it, but there was a moment there where you were not involved in it. campaign was happening, but except it didn't have as activists. We were busy working with finance ministers and the politicians trying to move them forward. And we lost sight of the fact we need to re-engage the activists in that work. So it's critical, I think, in the context of what we started now. It's 5 years since we launched the Retirement Security Campaign this September, that we refocus on the energy and efforts that needed to win this campaign. Because fundamentally, since we started it, of course, the crisis is just deepened. This hasn't really evaporated. And fundamentally, we've got work to do. This is one of 17 events we're doing across the country. And by the time December the 11th rolled around, we would hope we would complete all of those events. Because whether it's a large audience like this or small audience in other places, the reality is everywhere I've gone, activists are extremely excited about the importance of this issue. So I'll make some general comments here tonight about the campaign itself, where we're going, give you some additional information. My colleague Angela will also do some of that when she, of course, deepen the presentation about the analysis. You know, Erin Harris, our Ontario Regional Director. Stand up, Erin. We've worked with Sean and the affiliates here tonight, so I want to thank her again for the work that they've been doing together. And we're looking forward. This is, by the way, so if you think you come here tonight and that's it, forget it. This is just a start. We've got to win this campaign. We also got to get rid of this rotten government. And that's the next step in this process. So it's critical, I think, in the context and the work we have to do, that we remember that we've got to broaden this audience. We've got to broaden the relationship with others who are not here tonight. But we've also got to take the information back, because the more Canadians find out about the retirement security crisis we're dealing with, and I'll give you some perspective about that, the more there is an appreciation about the work we have done now for the last 5 years and the importance of it. But this is an issue that we could easily have sat on the sidelines and watched it go on forever and not do anything. So I want to, of course, thank you for coming here tonight. As I start to talk to you, I think there is, we have said there's a serious crisis in retirement in Canada on a go-forward basis. As a country, we're headed, I think, in the wrong direction, and we believe, from the analysis we'll do, and you'll get that from Angela when she makes her presentation, that there is a crisis brewing. Our society is growing older. I don't need to tell you that. I'm feeling it. So I'm joining the ranks like many of you in this room here. And I don't think we're prepared for what's coming, because unfortunately, when you see some of the statistics, I think you're going to be a little bit shocked. And I think if we don't act now, local economies, I think in this city, our public finances, our quality of life in our country is going to suffer really a far-reaching impact on a go-forward basis. Just look at I guess some of the warning signs. Old age poverty in our country is already rising. I don't need to tell you that. More and more. There's 1.7 million seniors in this country today. 30% of all seniors are, of course, getting GIS that are targeted for low income in this country. And that number, is, of course, is going to grow significantly. Depending how you measure it, that's 12% of seniors who live in this country that are living in poverty today. And the poverty rates are twice as high for seniors living alone. So that's mostly single women. They're in a worse situation to begin with. They're at the greatest risk, I think, if the large part, there's two elements to it. Women, as you know, join the workforce at a later age because they have child rearing responsibility. But in addition to that, of course, most often than not, their partner die, and of course, their ability to have their own pension sometimes get diminished as a result of that. In Canadian cities, the average monthly benefit from CPP or GIS doesn't get you to the poverty line when you look at where we're at today. And of course, we've heard incredible stories when we launched this campaign in Toronto, seniors struggling to make ends meet. We heard seniors told us the story firsthand. They would walk 3 to 5 miles rather than use a bus fare to get on the bus. They go into the grocery store to purchase grocery, and they look for day-old vegetables and other things that they can buy that's cheaper. Not because they shouldn't buy the fresh vegetables and they shouldn't buy fresh produce, because it would save a penny here. Not using a bus fare, maybe in Toronto is about $3.25. They don't do it because it's $3.25. When you are living on fixed income, of course, the reality of making ends meet until the end of the month is extremely difficult. CPP recipients are resorting to food banks more across the country because they don't have enough. Elderly homeowners struggling with heating bills. They got to turn off the heat because they can't afford to pay it, even with the subsidy that the province are providing right now. Pulp and paper workers in New Brunswick who retired into poverty, of course, because the company went bankrupt, and of course, their pension was not solvent, and of course they end up getting less at the end of the day. Poor seniors will be hit the hardest by government's decision to raise OAS and GIS from 65 to 67. In today's dollars, by the way, that will represent 30,000 by the time this decision actually comes into play at the end of the day. And the federal government, of course, is making it harder for older immigrants who's coming to the country to access GIS. In the past, it used to be 10 years before you can access GIS. With the new rules, it'll be 20 years now for you too. So families going to have to look after older siblings that are coming, older parents, grandmothers, grandfathers, whatever it might be. This will almost certainly increase poverty among newcomers to Canada, and middle-class Canadians also are in trouble. Half the baby boomers with average income between $35,000 and $80,000 are at risk of falling short in retirement. As a matter of fact, has been suggested through research, you're going to see a 25% drop in your retirement income by the time you get there. They will, of course, experience significant drop in the standard of living, and many will struggle to make ends meet during the retirement years. But sisters and brothers, I think, of course, my biggest worry is for young people, the ones who are not yet in the workforce, the ones who are in the workforce, for two reasons. Young people face, I think, a future that is radically different from my generation. Certainly when I was at their age, I could quit a job in the morning and find a job in the afternoon. Today, that's no longer a reality for young people for the most part. Today's youth are spending more time working in precarious jobs, part-time, temporary, or contract work across this country. Since 2008, young people have experienced double-digit unemployment in this country. It's held at 14%. Finally, it dropped below 14% in the last set of job numbers that came up. And by the way, if you look at Aboriginal youth, it's even worse across the country, and racialized youth. So the reality is, despite all the kind encouragement we've given young people, go to school, get a good education, the fact when they graduate, they can't even find a decent job. It's taking them longer to find a good paying job, which comes to the pension. Of course, those work-based for pensions are increasingly scarce. Fewer than 1 in 4 private sector workers today have a pension plan. 1 in 4. And I can tell you, my colleagues who are here, who works and negotiate in the private sector, every single bargain, any affiliates of bargaining in the private sector, employer are demanding changes to the pension plan, or if not, outright want to get rid of the pension plan altogether. That's their demands. Of course, we're saying we got to push back, and we got to push back hard. Of these, 1 in 10 have a defined benefit. Everywhere, defined benefits plans are under attack, and of course, many more employers simply don't want to pay for pension altogether if they can get out of it. And more Canadians are expected to save for retirement simply on their own. But left to fend for themselves cannot save voluntarily, and I'll give you the statistic again. With wages growing slowly and not at all, household taking on more and more debt, household indebtedness is 166% of disposable income. The highest has been in our country in the longest period that we can remember. Anybody can in keeping statistics. Many individuals try to save for PSAC and mutual funds, but too much of your retirement gets skinned off by the banks and insurance company. Just 1% in fees charged by the mutual funds will reduce your lifetime saving by 25%. The typical mutual fund charges 2.5%, will slash your returns by half by the time you get to that 40 years of contribution in your RSP. Despite this, the federal government has given us, yes, another voluntary savings scheme called Pool Retirement Pension, which is simply RSP with another coat of paint. It's completely voluntary for employer to offer. They don't have to make a single penny in terms of contribution. And by the way, there's no regulations in terms of how much fees you're going to pay for them to manage that account. They will do nothing to address the retirement crisis we're facing with, and of course our research is clear, leaving workers to fend for themselves in retirement is a recipe for disaster. In this context, expanding CPP makes perfect sense, and the CPP and the QPP in our country, I think, force employers to participate and contribute equally with, of course, the workers for their retirement income at the end of the day. Employers can't opt out. They have to contribute, and the CPP and QPP is fully portable. If you do 25 jobs before you get to retirement, or you do simply 1 job before you get to retirement, you will take your full contributions at the end of your period of work. It's virtually universal. Nearly all, of course, workers save for retirement through their CPP or QPP in our country. CPP pays, of course, a predictable benefit, protected against inflation because it's indexed, so you don't lose the value of what you're going to get when you start collecting it. But of course, it's at a relatively low cost. It's the lowest pension plan to administer in our country to a large extent. For workers who already have a workplace pension plan, CPP, of course, will provide options. One of the options of options is to use an expanded CPP, of course, to release some of the pressures on our existing plan. As you know, many pension plans have CPP integrated into it. So if your CPP rises, take some of that pressure. So all this unfunded liability that we talk about and the pressures that employers figure out, how they keep that plan going, it'll make it that much easier at the end of the day, because if CPP provides a larger portion of the pension, it'll make it easier for us to keep our pension plan. The biggest problem with the CPP, of course, it was set at too low a level when it was created. The average CPP retirement pension is about $540 a month. I know most of us don't know that because we don't think about the CPP until we're close to retirement. So if you're planning on $1,000, unless you've contributed the highest rate for the last 25 or 30 years, you're not going to get $1,000 per month. And for women, it is even less due to inequality in pay and time spent raising children across the country. For average women, you just receive just about $455 a month. That's what women get in terms of average payout. Friends, the phasing of double CPP is a sensible and a doable and is necessary. And of course, from 1997 to 2003, the economy and employment grew strongly while CPP contribution increased was phased in at that period of time. Businesses can afford it. And just to go back a bit on that phase-in period, that was the time right after the recession. Paul Martin insisted we had to do something to make the CPP, of course, much more solvent going forward. So they phased in the largest increase we've seen in the CPP in its entire history. And for that entire period, the economy grew. Unemployment came down, despite all the rhetoric you hear from Harper and his minions. Employment grew, the economy grew, and to a large extent, by the way, there was little stress for employers to support and, of course, to do that. In terms of our argument about doubling the CPP, business can't afford it. Both small business and large employers have experienced a windfall tax cut in the last little while. CPP contribution by employers are fully deductible from their business income. Something they don't talk about, by the way, when you hear the CFIB rant about why they are opposed to CPP. Employers that offer no workplace pension, 98% of small business, are free riding on the taxpayers, because what they get to do, they provide no opportunities for their employees to save for their retirement. So you go ahead and do all of it on your own. And at the end of the day, by the way, when those employees get to retirement, because they don't have a decent pension, guess who provide OAS and GIS for those workers? We do through the general tax system, again, at the end of the day. Workers, I think, employed by small business will be forced to rely on GIS retirement income, and which are paid by the taxpayers. And I think it's not fair, it's not sustainable on a go-forward basis. We also need to return the eligibility age for OAS and GIS to 65. There has never been an argument made why Harper did what he did in regard to going to Davos to announce he's going to move the age for collecting OAS and GIS to 67. I think Harper showed up in Davos and couldn't think of a single thing to say other than, oh, I got a brilliant idea. Forget what I'm telling you. The Parliamentary Budget Office that looked at this issue, when he examined it at the time when Harper made the announcement, he said there's no justification for this. There's no crisis for us to continue to pay out GIS and OAS at 65, and moving it to 67. The other side, what we have to come to terms with, what is this going to do by moving to 67? Think of disabled Canadians who are struggling quite often as when they can start collecting. Are going to make it much more difficult for them to do. The province got left holding the bag. Think of workers who have worked in a job that is very hard on their body for their entire life, and who needs to get to retirement. This, of course, is going to make it that much more difficult and put them in poverty at the end of the day. So it's critical, I think, in that context, to recognize what this does. By the way, millionaires in this country does not get GIS and OAS. It is working people that gets this benefit. And it's critical for us to recognize and put it in that context. This is clearly, again, punishing working people who have contributed to build this country and make their life that much more difficult when they get to retirement. We can afford, of course, to use a portion of the federal budget coming up to tell to those poorest seniors in our country, the ones that are getting GIS, to give them a raise. For the first time since 2008, we've got surplus money in the budget. I can't think of one group of workers that deserve a raise in this country. Those who have helped build this country in the many years of their career, help contributing. No fault of their own, they're living with poor incomes today and getting GIS. We can give them a raise to lift them out of poverty. Every penny that they get will be spent back into the economy. It will not be shoveled in some bank account in Bahamas or somewhere across the country. So my generation benefit from the important pensions like CPP because workers who came before us fought for it and established it at the end of the day. We enjoy Medicare today because, of course, earlier generation fought for these things. And they did this. Tommy Douglas was right, by the way. The reason we need a national healthcare system in this country, and he established in Saskatchewan, because he recognized who were the people who died and who were the people who were not able to afford healthcare when their kids were sick or they had sickness in their family. It was working people. The rich is always going to have benefit, by the way. It doesn't matter what the system looks like. It is us who have to fight. So now I think it's the same has to be done for this generation. This is our fight, by the way. And we owe it, of course, to them to ensure they have dignity and retirement and security. There's something fundamentally wrong. As we were going through this campaign for the last 5 years, something struck me that's really, I think, is very basic. If you spend a lifetime in this country working, regardless of whether you're a union member or not, if you spend a lifetime, there's something fundamentally wrong that after a lifetime of work, you have to live in poverty. There's something fundamentally wrong with our system. And a country as rich as ours, that it doesn't matter who you are, if you spend a lifetime working, by the time you get to that age, to retirement, you should not have to live your life in poverty. And that is fundamental to public policy. We have to ensure that every Canadian, regardless of what walk of life they come from, when you get to that age, you should not have to figure out whether you're going to walk 3 miles because you're not going to use that money to buy a bus fare because you figure that's going to make you that much poorer at the end of the week. We have been fighting for a better pension for the last 5 years, and you know what many people says to me is saying, why is the C.L.C. continuing this campaign? 1, we must win it, and 2, it's critically important for working people. Because if we don't win this campaign, by the way, think what the next generations are going to be dealing with. We've come an enormous distance since 2008. Now, when we launched this campaign, I got to tell you this, we were sitting around the office and having a discussion, and most people said to us, and the affiliate says, are you guys mad? Are you absolutely mad? And we said, why? In the middle of a recession, you're launching a campaign to improve pensions in the country? We said, yeah, it's the right time to do it. Well, when would you launch a campaign? And in 5 years, we didn't even have a single government who supported us. Our affiliates were skeptical this was the wrong timing, but by the way, in 5 years, what we have done. We've today we still hold 8 provinces on side to support the expansion of CPP. And every public opinion in this country that we can measure has been on our side. Newspapers that would never write one good article as to why we need to do this. The Globe and Mail most recently last December came out and said they support an expanded CPP. So back then, of course, as you remember, there was a recession, and of course, people thought that we were crazy to do that. In the midst, of course, the crisis, we launched a campaign for everyone. At that time, the campaign didn't have a single supporters. The Labour, of course, we organized community gatherings like this across the country. Town halls, meeting, public debate. We ran radio ads, print and advertising spot in many times, in many years after year. Gradually, of course, our polling began to show the majority of Canadians in provinces across this country supported an expansion of CPP. We built support in municipalities. In 2010, we did something that was a bit risky, but that was necessary. We took a resolution to the Canadian Federation of Municipalities through our friends who were, of course, have some ability to do that. They got it on the convention floor, of course, and more importantly, guess what? It was passed unanimously at the Canadian Federation of Municipality Conference in Toronto. Over 2,000 delegates, these are city councillors and mayors across this country. When they voted, there was not a single person voting against the resolution. It was simply a miracle in the work that was done because they got it, they understood. There's nothing like understand local politics. When people are poor, they live in a local community. One thing that City Hall understands and City Council understand, we have to look after that people. So we built support in civil society, anti-poverty organization, we even brought, of course, church group, seniors organization supported us, the Canadian Federation of Students and campus group got on board. We built the credibility on the subject. Of course, we had Mark Dussault, of course, looked at our numbers, and of course, he endorsed the campaign. He think we should go farther. Mark says, you're not going, Bernard Dussault said we need to go farther. But we also had the support of leading pension experts in the country who looked at these issues objectively and said the C.L.C. is right. Actuaries, pension consultants, public finance, all had endorsed the campaign. That was nothing sort of I can describe as inevitable. Even the Canadian Medical Association see and endorse the CPA enlargement as a way to reduce poverty among ill health among seniors over the long term. Because even the doctors get this. I met recently with the Canadian Medical Association. They said, we support your campaign. We're going to continue to push it. We're going to come up with a whole strategy how to deal with seniors across the country. In June 10, of course, as you may remember, the finance minister committed to a modest increase of CPP when they met in PEI. And of course, they had a three-prong approach. One was to have a private system. One, of course, was to expand the CPP. And of course, they were looking at some reform. And as we know, in 2010, from the summer to the December of that year, Harper changed his mind and said, of course, time was not right to expand the CPP. And ever since, they have come right out again opposed to expand the CPP. We've shown the economic conditions are actually more favorable today than in the 1990s when the premium went up. That's what's interesting about this period. When Paul Martin decided to do what he was going to do in terms of increasing premium, the economic condition was worse off for the country as it is today. And of course, we recognize fundamentally that governments have also have a consensus among the province and see the need to do this. The province clearly understand that if we don't get this done, they're going to be left holding the bag. Because one way or another, we're not going to have seniors on the sidewalk and tin cups in their hand. Some way or another, we're going to support that. And the province is going to have to support those poor seniors. So it's critical, I think, in that way. The law says that you need 2/3 of the provinces and 2/3 of the population. We have held that since 2010. You know, it's a miracle that we could get the province on side. By the way, I had to spend the last 5 years going to talk to finance minister. First, when I started this, I thought, I'm not going to like this. I have to say, in retrospect, I've built some very close relationship and friendship with some finance minister across. One who still remained as a finance minister when we started this work is Wes Sheridan from PEI. He's truly a remarkable supporter and a friend. He believes in this stronger than anybody, and he's committed 100%. He said, our government is in with the C.L.C. for as long as it takes. Whenever you get there, we will be there with you. We're never going to abandon this campaign because we see the value of it at the end of the day. So we build a consensus, and I think among the provinces, of course, and we continue to keep the proposal to enhance CPP. Last December, we decisively moved the goalposts on the campaign to expand CPP, and we won, of course, the intellectual debate. Critics like the Globe and Mail came on side, and of course, I think we're at a different place. Calgary Herald, the Vancouver Sun, and Toronto Star all got behind us in terms of editorial. So the tide has shifted, momentum has swung on our side, and the federal government, of course, came right out and said, we don't support an expanded CPP anymore. We just outright opposed to it altogether. So we know, of course, brothers, that retirement security for Canadians is an important issue. Canadians get it. Canadians have heard us and they agree with us. I can tell you most recently, we did our own polling in the Congress. 75% of Canadians support an expanded CPP. And that group of Canadians said, we don't need to wait till the recessions are more favorable. We need to do it now. Most recently, the Ontario government did their own polling back in the summer of August of this year and released those numbers. Guess what it says? 75% of Canadians support an expanded CPP. Don't forget when we started this, nobody was on side. So I want to conclude to say to all of you, I was in two places over the last little while, and you know, I'm an optimist in life, so if you're trying to make me a cynic, you're never going to succeed. I was in Saskatchewan to speak at the Federation Labour Convention, and we approached Brad Wall back in the summer. As you know, Brad Wall is a conservative, and he's very right-wing. We thought it'd be important to go and see him in his office and spend some time to talk about the campaign. And we did. We had a good conversation. He revealed two things. One, he didn't say no. Secondly, he said, Sam, I think my finance minister is closer to where you're at than where I'm at, politically. I said, hey, that's a start. So he didn't say no. And he promised to continue the dialogue, and we'll go back and keep engaging him. Like it or not, I don't have to like Brad Wall, but he is the Premier of Saskatchewan. We have to talk to him. We can't excuse ourselves for not doing it. Just this week, on Monday, I was in Alberta. Now, you know, there's been a change in Premier in Alberta. And of course, Jim Prentice is now the Premier of Alberta. I met with his Chief of Staff. And of course, I said, listen, you know what our campaign is about? Without any hesitation, Prentice agreed, actually. I don't even have to, he wasn't in his office at that time, so I met with his Chief of Staff. But he's committed. He's coming to Ottawa in January. He's going to come to the Canadian Labour Congress building because he wants us to brief him with the campaign. He said to Gil McGowan, my colleague who's the Federation President, he said, Gil, I've looked at these numbers when I worked for the Commerce Bank. And I think what you guys have done is absolutely incredible. We got to do something about this right now. We understand that. We need to talk to you about how we can get there, but our government is not opposed. Now, how we can get him there, I don't know. But I can tell you, for the last 5 years, when we started this campaign, actually Alberta supported us. Of course, the finance minister left, and then Ted Morton, that right-wing lunatic, of course, became the finance minister, and you couldn't talk to him about even air. You think there should be a price on air to breathe too. But that buffoon got defeated, and I think we're a different place. So in the 5 years of this campaign, many things have happened. Now, where are we going to be by the time the election will come? I don't know where Harper is going to be, and I'm always an optimist of something miraculous that can happen one morning. Harper will wake up and say, oh my God, if I do retirement security, maybe I'm going to get reelected. I don't know. But the reality is we can't allow Harper to decide what happens with this issue. This issue is far too important. Now then, because we got a few young people in the audience, Mark has got his kids in the back, and we've got a young woman here sitting in the front. I really want to end on a very personal note because I have a 6-year-old daughter also. This fight is about them. Fundamentally, it's about them. Because you see, for many of us here, I don't know about you, but we had nothing to do with the previous fight. Some of us may be old enough to remember that. But the reality is, it was a generation before us that fought to establish the Canada Pension Plan. It was a generation before us that fought for the Medicare system we have in this country today. And this is our moment to make that fight critically important. So the young people that grow up at some point, by the time they get to our age, they're going to have a better retirement security system in this country. There's 11 million Canadians who relied on, the only thing they have for their pension is CPP. 11 million. 60% of the population. That's all they have. I don't need to tell you, based on the numbers I just presented to you, nobody can live on $500 a month. And it's likely, of course, to get worse unless we do something in a short time. So this is a critical moment in the campaign. And the reason for relaunching it, because I do believe we can win this fight. With your efforts and support, I know we'll go a long way. We're asking you to do a number of things. You'll get a presentation from Angela. We've got to keep the pressure on the Conservatives to support this effort. We've got to, of course, continue to lobby them. We've got to email them. We've got to call them. We've got to do petitions, whatever is necessary to build this campaign. Because like it or not, if they don't do something by now in the election, we have to make this a ballot box issue. When people go and cast their vote in the next election, hopefully they elect the government to support us to expand CPP, and I believe we can do that at the end of the day. Everywhere I go across this country, I'm saying exactly what I'm saying to you. So I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I want to thank you for your support that you've given in the past, and I also want to thank Sean and the Labour Council for their consistent support on this work we've been doing. It's critical the Labour Council be recognized for their role, but more importantly, understand that you're the local community here. We can't build this without the Labour Council's efforts. So thank you so much, and I look forward, of course, for a wonderful evening. But I also want to tell you, next year, and Sean will tell you tonight, we're going to have a political action conference in Ottawa, because there's election coming, just in case you're wondering. And I know, I don't need to tell you this, we don't have to like the Prime Minister. What we have to do is defeat him. And we need to do that, and we need to do it soon. If they call the election, we got to get ready. Our political action will prepare us. There's workshops, and there's some direction we're going to give you, but more importantly, we want to work with you to ensure we can win that fight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hassan. So we're now going to hear from our three panelists. Each panelist is going to speak for about 10 minutes or so. So we'll start off with Dickson, who has been a member and quite active in 4 different unions, including the PSAC and PIPSC, spanning a period of 30 years. He has recently retired after 30 years of being a CRA tax auditor. He currently sits on the PIPSC National Board of Directors and is National PIPSC Finance Chair. In addition, he was recently awarded a Lifetime Membership Award in PIPSC. Welcome, Doug.
Good day, my name is Del Dickson, and I almost feel guilty sitting here because I'm retired on a, well, we don't call it a pension, we call it deferred compensation from the government because I paid into it. And the thing is, when we negotiated, that was taken into account. We would have maybe gotten for more wages if we didn't have this deferred compensation, but the government and the papers keep wanting to call it gold-plated pension plan. The only gold-plated pension plan I know is the MP's pension plan, and I don't collect that. So the whole point is, we started the superannuation in 1944, and we negotiated lots of times along the way, including giving up some other benefits in order to keep this pension plan. So it was not given to us, we paid for it. In 1965, the CPP came out, and I'd like to echo the President's numbers. The maximum you can collect on the CPP is $1,034. The maximum on old age security is about $500. Put that all together, it'd be $18,000. I don't believe anybody in Canada today can live on $18,000. Now there's some other supplements, but we're reducing our seniors who have built this country into living in poverty. In 1967, when we had our first rights to collective bargaining, when PSAC started, actually, PIPSC was one of the groups that didn't join them. The right to negotiate our pension was not put into collective bargaining. I think that was an error. But also, by trivia, 1967 is the last time the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup.
Whoa. Be careful now. I'm from Toronto.
What happened there? I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. The NHL's Players Association started. Hallett Ballard, the owner of the team, in his infinite wisdom, got rid of anybody that supported the union of the players. This ruined the whole hockey team for since then and on. What can Harper learn from this? Because if we can ruin a hockey team by getting rid of the union activists, what can it do to a country? And this is important. And the whole point is, in the paper, we're always being told we got this beautiful pension plan. But we're not there. We're out to fight this fight to raise the pension plans for the average Canadian. And the whole point is, it's a race that drags us to the bottom instead of us dragging everybody else up. And the whole point is, our union has a strong retired members guild. We can say things our members cannot. A CRA auditor cannot attack the tax system in Canada because it's against the code of ethics they signed. But us as retired people, we can. And the whole point is, I don't understand when we're talking about this, why aren't we talking about stock options? Only the rich have stock options. That came in 1984 by Maroney. And don't tell me he didn't have stock options. It gets a special tax treatment where they pay only about half the taxes you and me would pay if we earned the same money. What about this income splitting that's coming out that only 5% of the population can benefit from? It's not going to help the average worker. We should be going after their pensions, because that's what those items that they're bringing out are pensions. The whole point is we're always on the defensive. We should go on the offensive. And the CPP and UIC, CPP, they make the big argument, well, it's going to drag down small business. From an economic point of view, maybe you'll touch on it, that's crap. Oops, that's wrong. There'll be more disposable income out there, and they'll be able to go in these small corner stores and spend their money because they'll have more money, raise money. As the board of directors, national board of directors, I'm asked to travel. Every time I get into a cab, and occasionally I go to a bar, I ask, how's business, especially in Ottawa? Ever since WFA, they're saying their business is down by 20%. I have yet to get a cabbie to come and speak at one meeting, because I'd love to get a cabbie to come and explain that his business is down because civil servants are not taking the cabs because people are being laid off. This is the reality of the situation. We're speaking their language. We should never use, for federal employees, we should never use the expression pension. It's deferred compensation. We fought for that, we paid into it. As for the average person, my parents were factory workers, and they basically retired on CPP and U.S.C. They had no pension plan. They managed in their day to put 5 of us through university. By the way, I went back to university since retired. But anyways, they managed to put them through. I doubt if two working parents with just 2 kids could put them through university on the wages and retired on CPP and UIC. We're the first generation that are going to leave our kids off worse than we got. Each generation's built us up. So this fight's important. Can we win it? Hell yes. In New Brunswick, Vice President Shannon Bintman's here supporting me tonight. Going to likely tell me what I did wrong on the way home. But anyways, in New Brunswick, they go into this fancy new thing. It's called targeted pensions or shared risk pensions. Basically, it's not a pension plan. It's at risk of the market. They're trying to say that target pension plans meet 97%, well, they're still short by their own numbers by 3%. But anyways, the Conservative government down there was saying there's no negotiating on it. However, while the Liberals were leading in the polls, we threw our support behind them totally. And we, as a union, would like to take part credit for the success of the Conservatives. Now the Liberals have only promised to open the books again and rediscuss it, but at least we can win this fight, and we can win it at the polls. However, we can't sit around. We have to be active, and I pretty well blew everything I had to say. I was going to talk about Nortel, but I believe one of my associates is going to talk about Nortel.
It's okay.
Well, Nortel is the classic, man. You want to read the classic way to ruin a pension plan. First of all, it went from defined benefit. Defined benefit, I'm sure everybody knows, but that's where you get defined. It's usually 2% times the number of years you worked. Well, they went to defined contribution. I don't think they served the papers right. I think there was a court case. I don't remember what happened. Defined contribution, basically the money goes into the market and you're at the mercy of the market. You know, pension plans are in trouble because of 2008. In economic terms, I hope you agree with me, it's a thing called the black swan. Black swan's a bird that's born to white swans, and you never can tell what's happening. In economic circles, a black swan is when an event happens that none of the economists or anybody else predicted. That's why the pension plans are in trouble. It's not because of the union wages. It's not because of the union's pensions. It's because we hit a bad spot in the road. So Nortel went to defined contribution. And then, through their infinite wisdom, to save money, they self-insured. So when they went bankrupt, because they were self-insured, they were not preferred, the pensioners were not preferred creditors anymore, so they did not get their full share. If it had stayed insured by another company, they would have got their full share. But I would like to see the CEO, how much bonuses they got during this period. Because it was the workers, on the backs of the workers, this went down. So the whole point, if you want to read a classic case how to ruin a pension plan, please read that. It's just scandalous. But right now, I do believe, as our president said, that if you worked all your life in Canada, you should not be eating dog food. You should not have to live in a room and house. And the thing is, we should be able to move forward with dignity. Who built this country? It was them. Thank you very much, and we will not give up the fight.
Del, Harry Gadban, Del. So there's Harry heads up the Unifor, which the taxi union in the city, and so you guys could speak maybe after the meeting, Del.
Thank you.
And by the way, I think PIPS is, I think a whole pile of people think that PIPS is doing some pretty cool work around trying to get out front and center on the 2015 federal election, so kudos to you, buddy. Okay, our next panelist is Gabriel Bourdon, who is current co-chair of the PSAC National Capital Region Young Workers Committee. In addition to sitting on his local executive, Gabriel is a member of regional and national committees within the PSAC. Gabe, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Gabriel Bourdon, as was previously mentioned, and I have to be louder. Thanks, Dave. And I am a member of Generation Squeeze, the generation that's lost out on support from both governments and employers. We're just starting our independent financial lives, and we are far below the standard which was expected by previous generations. Education is a great thing. You mentioned you went back to school, Del. I wonder how much more you're paying for school this time around than you did in your previous.
I'm a retiree, I get free.
Oh, wow. Bad example. I'm going on the fly here. I don't need to tell you how high tuition has gotten in comparison to previous generations' tuitions. I don't need to tell you that our generation is facing mountains of debt when getting out of school. We have to take out massive loans just to have the basic criteria to apply for a job. You don't have an education, good luck getting any type of income. And even if you do have a master's or doctorate, like some of my friends, I shouldn't say a lot, that's not true, some of my friends have, they're still looking for employment. And when they find one, it's some free internal internship or precarious employment is really all we're finding. There are no jobs out there. And we're coming out of school with tens of thousands of dollars of debt, looking for jobs that we can hold on to, which barely cover our payments for our loans. And that's the beginning of our financial lives. Where are we going to be at retirement? Does life get easier financially as we move on? I don't know, maybe other generations can speak to that. I don't think it's a good start. Not only we're facing precarious employment, but we're also facing non-unionized employment. And for those of us who can find full-time, solid jobs that are unionized, we're falling to the almighty two-tier contract agreements, which I hope to never hear about again after the last C.L.C convention. I'm lucky enough to have a full-time job in the public sector. I'm lucky enough to have a what do you call it? Sorry?
Deferred compensation.
Deferred compensation. And even that's being threatened. One of the most solid pension plans in the country is now being rebranded. They didn't get away with calling it a defined contribution, so now they're going at targeted benefit, shared, whatever. They're changing the lingo every week because they're trying to get the right brand to finally pass this junk piece of legislation and destroy our pensions. If you're in the private sector, stole a bit of my thunder, but I don't have a pension story, obviously, for myself, but I do have a family friend, Andy, who was unlucky enough to spend most of his career at Nortel. And I heard of the first wave of cuts to pensioners from Nortel, and the second wave of cuts to pensions for pensioners of Nortel, and I think now he's living on about 35% of what he was living on when he initially retired. Shame. The reason we need the Canada Pension Plan is because we can't count on employers to secure our financial future. That is not part of their bottom line. And because of that, we cannot count on them to care at all. And I hope that you understand that given our financial pressures, given the pace of today's daily grind, it's clear to me that it's not that we don't care about retirement or pensions. It's that saving for retirement is literally impossible, and we need help. That's why we need an improved CPP, and we sincerely need it more than anyone. Thank you.
Part of the piece that we often hear about, Gabe, is that young workers don't have an interest in the CPP, don't have an interest in pension because they're young, they're in their late teens, they're in their 20s or in their early 30s, and they have a long time to go before they retire. They can't connect the pieces. They can't see what retirement would be like because it's not even on the agenda. So it's really, really cool when, coming from a young worker, we hear your passion around the importance of pensions and the importance of CPP, and I'm hopeful that we can, in this community and in other communities as well, but we can work together to try and ensure that young workers see this as being a priority and work with us to cause some changes as the Canadian Labour Congress is working on doing. Okay, so now we're going to our third panelist. This is pretty good. So I look forward to reading this like all day. Ready? So her childhood and teens were spent in Hawkesbury. The family moved back to Ottawa in 1969. Out of high school, she worked 6 years in the banking industry, starting with a full-time job at $2,600 a year. She returned to school and obtained a cartography technician diploma and worked for the Geological Survey of Canada. After 5 years, she left and opened a graphic arts and screen printing company with a friend. They created artistic screen prints and at little cost produced material for the social, cultural, political movements of the time. This lasted 17 years. She then worked for a pharmacy at minimum wage for 1.5 years. She went back to school and landed a position with the government. This ended 12 years later with Harper's cost-cutting crusade. At 63, she had no choice but to opt for retirement. A year later, she joined ACORN, an independent organization advocating social and economic justice for low and moderate income families. She currently lives in Vanier. Gisele Bouvier, welcome.
My name is Gisele Bouvier. I am a member of ACORN. And I'll repeat, ACORN is an organization which advocates for social and economic justice for low and moderate income families. Mon nom est Gisele Bouvier et je suis membre d'ACORN. ACORN est une organisation engagée dans la justice sociale et économique pour les personnes à faible revenu et à revenus modestes. Nasty surprises happen in life that leave us penniless and force us to start life from zero. This happened to me in 1997. La vie nous réserve parfois des surprises déplaisantes qui nous laissent sans le sou et nous obligent à recommencer à zéro. Ceci m'est arrivé en 1997. J'ai donc emprunté de l'argent de ma famille et de la banque et je suis retournée aux études. En 2001, un stage étudiant en milieu de travail m'a donné un emploi bien rémunéré dans la fonction publique. J'ai remboursé mes prêts en moins de 3 ans. Ayant appris une leçon importante, j'ai épargné, épargné et épargné. I borrowed money from family and the bank and went back to school. In 2001, a student job placement landed me a well-paid position in the government. I paid off my loans within 3 years, and lesson learned, I saved, saved, and saved. In March 2013, another nasty thing happened. My position was eliminated in Harper's cost-cutting crusade. With all my savings and a small pension, I thank the union for that little extra, it pays my rent. I thought I was okay, until I started making calculations. Après 12 ans dans la fonction publique, en mars 2013, une autre surprise déplaisante est apparue. Mon poste a été aboli dans les coupures de Harper. Avec mes belles épargnes et une petite pension, je remercie le syndicat pour ce petit extra, ça couvre mon loyer. Je croyais être dans une bonne situation. Ensuite, j'ai commencé à faire des calculs. Actuaries say a life expectancy of 91 years is the target for how long a woman's retirement funds should last. In 26 years, the cost of living will skyrocket. With a $12,000 a year pension, below average CPP, and old age security, I have to dip into my life savings. No computer or internet for me. Les actuaires disent qu'une femme doit utiliser une espérance de vie de 91 ans pour déterminer la durée de ses fonds de pension. En 26 ans, le coût de la vie peut augmenter astronomiquement. Avec une petite pension de 12 000 $, un PPC sous la moyenne et la sécurité de la vieillesse, je puise déjà dans mes épargnes. Pas d'ordinateur et pas d'Internet pour moi. Annual increase in pension and CPP currently hovers around 1%. I expect Tony Clement and Harper to remove even this. And Freudian slip there. And Harper refuses to increase CPP and old age security. The only buffer against real cost of living increases is my life savings. And with record low interest rates, these will fade sooner rather than later. Présentement, la pension et le PPC augmentent annuellement aux alentours de 1%. Je m'attends à ce que Tony Clement et Harper éliminent même ceci. Harper refuse d'augmenter le PPC et la sécurité de la vieillesse. Il ne reste donc que mes épargnes pour amortir le choc de futures augmentations réelles dans le coût de la vie. Mais avec les bas taux d'intérêt, ces épargnes disparaîtront plus tôt que plus tard. As a result, I fear I am one of those Canadians who will outlive their retirement savings and fall into abject poverty when they are at their most vulnerable. Should I hope to die before this happens? Should I steal a minimum wage part-time job from a student? I think not. Je me compte donc parmi les Canadiens qui s'inquiètent de vivre plus longtemps que leurs épargnes de retraite et de sombrer dans une pauvreté abjecte quand ils seront alors plus vulnérables. Dois-je espérer mourir avant que cela arrive? Dois-je voler l'emploi à temps partiel et à salaire minimum d'un étudiant? Non. Je préfère travailler bénévolement pour ACORN et combattre pour changer le système pendant que je suis encore capable de le faire. J'espère pour un meilleur avenir, et pour un meilleur avenir, il faut arrêter Harper. Instead of one of those two possible solutions, I prefer to volunteer for ACORN and fight to change the system while I can, and hope for a better future. And for a better future, we must stop Harper.
Born and raised in rural Saskatchewan, Angela MacEwen is a senior economist with Canadian Labour Congress. She has an undergraduate degree in International Development Studies from St. Mary's University in Halifax, and a master's in economics from Dalhousie University. Her MA thesis examines social and economic determinants of unmet healthcare needs using data from the Canadian Community Health Survey. Angela has co-authored cost of poverty studies for the 3 maritime provinces and has been involved in several alternative budgets with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. She blogs on labour market issues, poverty and inequality at the Progressive Economics Forum. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you very much. So Hassan has pretty much laid the groundwork for you guys already. I'm going to show some graphs. I like graphs. I'm an economist. If you want to take a bit closer look at them, I have copies of the presentation on the back table, so that might be useful for you there. And it's hard to follow the real life stories of people too, hey? Because that's what really matters. But I'm going to give you maybe some of the tools that we can use to help make this, that's perfect, yep. Thank you, an election issue for the upcoming election. So, we have what Hassan said, we have a population that is aging rapidly. The number of seniors across Canada is going to double in the next 20 years. By 2041, 1 in 4 will be over the age of 65. And Canadians are living longer, both women and men. So we have, over the past 50 years, we've dramatically increased the lifespan of Canadians. And the number of working age Canadians that are going to be paying taxes and all of that good stuff to pay for OAS and health care is going to be shrinking to 2 working age individuals per senior. Now, I want to point out this is a little bit misleading because when the baby boomers were kids, they weren't working either, and we put them through school. So in terms of a whole ratio, a dependency ratio, when you include seniors and children, the ratio is going to be about the same as it was when the baby boomers were kids. So seniors are healthier than ever. In Canada, this shows a bunch of rich countries and what proportion of seniors say that their health is good. So we have a lot of very healthy people who are going to live for a very long time. And as a result, Canadians are working longer, especially in the private sector, but also in the public sector. So the age of retirement is increasing rapidly. And that was one of the justifications that was given for expanding OAS until the age of 67. Anyway, they said, well, Canadians are working longer. Anyway, let's just recognize that reality. But so Ottawa Canadians, people who live in Ottawa, are also working longer. We have about 1 in 6 seniors in Ottawa were still working after the age of 65. and that's double what it was 15 years ago. But working longer isn't a solution for everyone, because a lot of people leave the labor force before 65 because of their own health or to take care of family members who have ill health. So 1 in 4 fully retired seniors left the workforce because they were well. And 7 in 10 ended earlier. As we heard, there are layoffs. So maybe you're 63, you were planning to work until 65 or even 67 if you could, but you're downgraded and pushed out the door. So we can't always work as long as we want to. And we have a lot of people who are going to be retiring soon. I think Hassan made that point quite well. In Ontario, the share of workers who have access to a pension at work have shrunk, and it's lower in the private sector. Overall, our savings rate has shrunk. So this is quite a dramatic graph. If you compare our savings rate and our household debt. So Hassan was talking about our household debt being at all-time high levels. It's over 160% of our disposable income. Well, in the 90s, it was less than 80%, so it was half that. And our savings rate used to be close to 12%, but today it's only at 4%. So we're saving less, and we've got more debt. And that's because wages haven't been keeping up with the cost of living, right? Fees in RRSPs and other mutual fund savings vehicles, if you have a defined contribution plan, sometimes that just means that you're buying mutual funds, right? So there are fees associated with these savings vehicles. In a common mutual fund, a common fee is 2.5%. You can see on the top right-hand corner how much money the bank takes and how much money you take. On the bottom, if there's a low-cost fee, the CCP, one of the reasons that it's fantastic is because it has a low overhead and it costs very little. So you get to keep the money that you put into it. And so the bank makes very little, but you get to keep. And the difference, this is actually, we've worked out what the numbers are. And so if you put the same amount of money in over the same period into a mutual fund, you get $20,000. And if you put it into something like CPP, you're getting closer to $70,000. So it adds up over time, these fees that you pay on your money every year. And so you're left with very little. Public pensions are not enough for people to rely on. You simply cannot survive on CPP, OAS, and GIS alone. That will get a 2-income family to the poverty line in most of the major cities, but just. If you're a single person, you're below the poverty line. So this has us in Toronto and Ottawa just below the poverty line. As I said, RSPs, even if you can afford to contribute to them, they're not working for people. 90% of Ottawa seniors had money from CPP, but only 10% had income from RRSPs. Why is that? Because it's out of reach for most workers to contribute very much money to them at all. We had 180,000 Ottawa residents contributed to an RRSP in 2012. And those with incomes over $80,000, they accounted for over 70% of all contributions. So, but only 40% of contributors. So most people contributing to an RRSP have an income over $80,000. So it's out of reach for most workers. Seniors have low incomes and they face high costs. If you're looking for housing that's appropriate for you, if you need a little bit of extra help, the average one-bedroom space for seniors housing, assistive housing in Ottawa, was almost $3,000 a month in 2014. And last year in Ottawa, half of all seniors in Ottawa lived on less than $3,000 a month. So that would just be rent gone. it doesn't have to be this way. We can do something different, right? We can phase in CPP benefits, and we can restore OAS and GIS at age 65, and we can actually boost the GIS so that all seniors are over the poverty line. Hassan mentioned this, and I think it's particularly powerful when you're talking about, well, why double CPP? 11 million workers have no other savings plan but CPP. And when we have precarious workers who are moving from job to job, we don't have any kind of savings plan that will port easily from job to job and make it efficient. So when you're working in a whole bunch of different places, the most efficient thing you can do is expand CPP. It's completely portable. It's completely secure. We mentioned that it was expanded in 1997. That was to make it solid for 75 years. So right now, we have enough money in CPP to pay it out for the next 75 years. There is no risk of the CPP going under. It's inflation protected. You can't outlive your CPP benefit, so you're never going to run out. And it's the most efficient way to save. So what does this mean for the average person? We've run the numbers and we've figured it out. If you're 25 years old right now and you start paying into CPP, you're at the average wage, you're going to get $2,000 a month from your CPP pension. Without these improvements, that worker would get $1,000 a month. If you're 35 and you're earning the average wage, you're going to get $1,500 a month. Without our plan, it's $779. And if you're 45, you're still looking at getting $1,000 a month out of CPP instead of what most people get now, which is around $500. So how do we pay for that? Is it affordable for workers to be saving this money? We're already not saving very much. Does that mean we don't have enough to save? Well, if you're earning $30,000 a year in Ontario, what it means is that you save the equivalent of 7 Timbits a week for the first year, and then in the next year you add an extra $1.86 or 7 Timbits a week to your savings. So it's a very small gradual change over 7 years, but when you retire, you get double the CPP you would have otherwise. If you're earning $50,000, we've calculated that that would cost you about an extra 13 Timbits. So we think that's pretty affordable for most Canadians, considering what the benefit is. Can companies afford to expand CPP? As Hassan mentioned, corporate income tax rates have fallen from 29% to 15%. Non-financial corporations are sitting on about $650 billion in cash holdings right now, not investing in workers or equipment. Small businesses have gotten a lifetime capital gains exemption raised from $500,000 to $800,000, and it's been indexed to inflation. The small business federal income tax rate has been reduced from 12% to 11%. And the EI premium rate has been frozen for all businesses through 2016. And small businesses have gotten a rebate for the past 2 or 3 years, and that's been extended again as well. As well, CPP contributions are totally tax deductible. So yes, it's the most efficient way for an employer. Small businesses employers say that they want to provide pensions for their workers, and that the reason they don't is because it's complicated, there's lots of overhead, it's expensive. But CPP is simple, it's efficient, and responsible employers want to do this, right? This is the easiest way and the most efficient way for them to provide. What about the economic impacts in terms of the long-term growth? Are we going to be increasing CPP right at a time where we'll drive us back into recession. That's unlikely. So in 1997, we went from 6% to almost 10%. Over the same period, GDP rose by 23%. Real investment rose, employment grew, and the unemployment rate fell from 9.1% down to 6% before the recession. So there's been research around the minimum wage about whether or not minimum wage kills jobs. And the research shows that it's not the minimum wage that kills jobs, it's the broader economic conditions. The same is true for CPP. It's not about whether or not you're paying a little bit more for your deferred wages, deferred contribution to your wages. It's about whether or not we have the economic system in place. So if we have a government that's making investments in future growth, in productivity, CPP will have no impact whatsoever on employment or economic growth. And it will give seniors money in their pockets so that they can buy the things that they need. And pretty much every economist that's looked at it agrees. It makes sense. When you're looking at what's wrong with the Canadian economy right now, it's a lack of effective demand. That means people are going without. They're not able to buy the things that they need for their family. And how do you improve effective demand? Well, you redistribute wealth to low-income Canadians. That's how you do it. The debate has been settled. We've won the debate. Hassan mentioned this. The Globe and Mail agrees with us. All kinds of people agree that it makes sense. Canadians agree that this makes sense. We've won the debate. We just need to make it happen. Thank you very much.